All right. Well, we've got folks coming in. Welcome, welcome. I'm gonna give it just a few minutes for people to come on in. So please don't mind our banter. That's just a thing that we're doing right now as we wait a few moments for people to join in. Really quick, we are very, very happy to have you and welcome to Global Entrepreneurship Week. If this is the first session that you've attended, this is a really great place to land because we're going to talk about the building blocks of a business and how you can safely and how you can compliantly, I don't think that's a word, but compliantly create a business that will save you some headache in the long run. So just a couple minutes and we will be right with you. Feel free to sound off in the chat if you see some friends, you want to say hi. Definitely talk to our panelists, Chris Brown and Meghan Hovee, and we will get started in just a few minutes.
Hey, Lauren, let me chime in real quick before you get going too. The chat is only between us and the other panelists and the guests. So the guests can't communicate with each other, but they can communicate with us. So they can use the Q&A to talk to us. They can use the chat to talk to us, which is good.
My bad. I know how Zoom works. We've been doing
that's all right.
For like how many years now?
I do a decent number of these webinar events, and no offense to all the attendees, but we've learned that when attendees can talk to one another, sometimes things go bad. And I've seen that happen. And so a lot of times we disable chat among attendees when it's going to be like 100 people, because inevitably somebody's going to go off the rails, but not the attendees here so far.
I mean, I'm looking at the participants coming in, and I have deep faith in these amazing people who are joining our chat. I see some familiar faces. Oh, and there goes Meghan again.
I lost Meghan again. Hopefully she'll come back.
That's a little disconcerting, but she'll come back. Yeah.
It's great that we can see all the attendees because I know so many of them, which is wonderful.
Yeah, well, and it looks like Jeff Wielden has also experienced the Zoom bombing. Serious problem even in my tiny meetup group. I have never experienced that, but I'm gonna knock on wood right now because man. And
well, I might recommend you
if you can hear my dog, she just wanted to say hey.
I'd recommend you go ahead and kick it off, and I'm sure Meghan will be back in a second, and I'm going first anyway. So okay. If it takes her a couple of minutes to get back in, that's okay.
Sure thing. You know what? It is the entrepreneurial way to just keep on rolling. All right, friends. Well, welcome to this GEW session. Hope that you have been availing yourselves of Global Entrepreneurship Week, the resources, support, and championship that Casey SourceLink and the Kauffman Foundation provide. Today, we're gonna be taking things back to basics. I feel we have with us. Well, we will soon have with us two experts who are ready to help you build your business, but do so in ways that are legally compliant and accounting with accounting that works for your business. And so we're going to be talking to Chris and Meghan. I'm going to go ahead and let Chris kick it off. Chris, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Pixel, and I believe you have some things and some best practices that you'd like to share.
Sure thing. So the whole concept of this session is to help you start a business or possibly clean up a business that you've already created and it just needs some love and care. I am the lawyer, so of course I'll talk about the legal issues here. I'm going to share just one quick slide with everybody. I'm going to talk about how do you actually set up a company, and if you've already set up your company, these same tips might be helpful if you did it wrong, so you can go back and fix things later. But by way of background, my name is Chris Brown. I am the owner of Pixel, which is a law firm that supports entrepreneurs, small businesses, startups, freelancers, kind of anybody who's in the business world. I do trademarks, contracts, LLC, corporation formations, all that kind of stuff. I spent most of my legal career in Kansas City, but I'm now in Boulder, Colorado while I'm expanding my firm here. But I'm virtual almost entirely. So I still represent, well, probably about 95% of my clients are still in Kansas City. So anyway, if you want to start a company, here's kind of the nuts and bolts. I'm going to do this in about 3 or 4 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. Obviously, I could talk like an hour about each bullet point, but we don't have that today. Today is about Q&A. So first thing, file articles of organization with the Secretary of State. And this is primarily if you're going to form an LLC. Most new companies are going to be an LLC. You might choose to be a corporation in certain situations, but most of the time you're going to form an LLC. If you do that, you pick the state, and most people will form their LLC in the state in which they're operating. In Kansas and Missouri, or I should say in Kansas City, it's unique because you can pick either side and people commonly cross the border all the time. But I typically recommend you pick the state in which you're going to be operating in. So if you live in Kansas but work in Missouri, it's probably best to incorporate in Missouri. So you file the document with the Secretary of State, which you can just do on the website. It's a very simple one-page form. I usually recommend you choose manager managed on that form. Missouri will ask you that question, but Kansas will not ask you that question. What that means is you're designated one or more persons to be the manager of the company. That manager has power to sign contracts and take action on behalf of the company. Also in that filing, you have to designate a registered agent, which is more or less just where lawsuits get mailed. You need to use an address where you can be found at a regular basis. So it's an office address, a home address, etc. If you don't want to use your own address, you can pay a company like Northwest Registered Agent to serve for you. And they will charge, I think it's $125 a year. And they will give you an address. If somebody mails a lawsuit to the address, they'll scan it and send it to you. I personally use that because I like some of the privacy that gives me, but it's up to you if you want to serve on your own or hire an agent company. So once you form the company with the state, you then draft up an operating agreement. And if it's just one person who owns the company, it might be a 2 or 3 page document. If you have 2 or more owners, it's probably going to be more like 20 pages, maybe 15, and sometimes 60, right? And the operating agreement outlines the rights and responsibilities of the owners of the company with respect to the company. So it'll say, how do you add a new co-owner to the business? How do you get somebody out of the business? What are the voting rights and economic rights? Could have transfer restrictions that prohibit you from selling your ownership interest without the consent of the other members. Restrictive covenants, things like non-competes, non-solicitations, confidentiality obligations, right? It's all those obligations put into one document. You can draft this yourself. You can buy a template online, or best thing is to hire an attorney to help you with this. But you, in theory, could do it by yourself or with a template online. Okay, so you filed the company with the state, drafted your operating agreement. Now you go to the EIN website on the IRS's website. Answer a whole bunch of technical questions there. You can probably do this yourself, but it's best to have a lawyer or an accountant like Meghan do this for you. But anyway, you answer the questions and you get your EIN. The EIN is your employer identification number, which is just a unique number that identifies your business with the IRS and other government entities. Now that you have those 3 things, the articles, the operating agreement, and your EIN, you can take all 3 of those to the bank and open up your business bank account in the name of the LLC. And at that point, you're up and running. It's wonderful. Congratulations, you have an LLC. Now, there's a lot of other stuff you might want to think about doing. You might need to file annual reports on an ongoing basis. You obviously need to open up other tax accounts, which I think Meghan will probably talk about. And there's more things on an ongoing basis, but that's the core thing to do when you want to at least get started. That's all I got.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much, Chris. Next up, we are going to talk to Meghan. Meghan is our accounting expert, guru, thought leader. So Meghan, if you want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do, and then kind of give us a base building block perspective. Friends, if you have questions, please be sure to submit those through Q&A. Once Meghan is finished, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to go right into Q&A. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask the questions that are most pressing to you. Now, I will promise you, we will not get to all of the questions. I will generally choose the ones that apply to the most amount of people. So keep that in mind as you're asking. If you want to get really specific, I am sure that Chris and Meghan would love the opportunity to offer you a consultation or see if they can help you offline. So do not forget to ask those questions. But Meghan, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Lauren, and thanks as always for hosting. You're an amazing host. So good to be here. I am a CPA in Kansas City, and I have an accounting firm where we have multiple accountants who help small business owners. That's really our target. We don't help the larger corporate, 10 million plus in revenue, but we also don't do just individual tax returns. Our heart is really to help the small business owner either starting their business or running their business. So this is my world. This is what we do every day, is have these conversations with clients. I would start off by saying Lauren did kind of ask our takeaway from today's meeting, and I might just start off with that I would say, number one, don't be overwhelmed by the compliance that comes along with being a business owner. Don't let that scare you from getting into the game. I like to joke that you're probably not in business if you've never received a notice from your city or your state about this or that unpaid tax or fee. Like that's kind of part of it. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, but you can do it, and you can become empowered to do it. So on one hand, don't be so overwhelmed by the stuff that we talk about today that you would deter you from starting. On the other hand, give yourself on a regular basis, whether it's every month or every week, give yourself kind of the admin time to give this some focus. So you might say, I don't know how much to save for taxes now that I'm self-employed. Hire a professional as a one-time consultation or find YouTube videos, but the more you educate yourself, the more empowered you're going to feel. So, number one, I'm going to try to be like Chris and just hit a couple bullets, but hit them quickly. Number one, when you're starting off, whether you're starting in the beginning and you don't have very much revenue coming in, or you do have revenue right away, track your income and your expenses. And nowadays, software is so inexpensive that you can start this right away, even if you have no revenue. There's programs like Wave, FreshBooks, Xero, that it's like an app it's swiping. It is swiping to categorize your income and your expenses. So, that's something I would do right away. If you want to keep it in an Excel spreadsheet, that's fine, but do it. You don't want to get to the end to tax time and tell your tax person or look at TurboTax and say, I have no idea how much I spent on my business. You want to know, however you track that, you want to know those things. That carries through. I can't believe how many businesses I see that get to $1 million in revenue, big successful business, and their numbers are super wrong and messy because there never was that time in the beginning. If you don't do it now, you're probably not going to do it in 3 years when you've grown. So just make that part of your rhythm, I would say. And eventually you'll hire that, you'll outsource that, but don't neglect it as the business owner. Give it some attention. So one thing I want to talk about is, there's not a direct correlation between the legal side of your business and the legal entity and the tax side. In the tax world, there's really 3 options when you're starting. As a business owner, when you get started, you start off as what's called a Schedule C. It is just a profit and loss from your business inside your personal tax return. That is how every business owner starts out, unless they make a different election. And it's hard to do. Like, you'll know if you're making an election to be taxed differently than that. So everyone starts off, it's one tax return. It's your personal return with a business schedule inside of it. The other option is S Corp. That's the most common client I have, is an S Corp owner. The difference between Schedule C and S Corp is an S Corp means your business has grown to the point that your profit in your business supports you taking a normal salary and you've got some profit left over. So once you become kind of enterprise and you have a bottom line that's really flowing and it's like, wow, I could take a regular salary and still have some money left over, that's kind of the time to consider the S Corp election. The third option for tax structure as a business owner is C Corp. And honestly, it's not very common for most businesses, but if you are doing a true tech startup and you're seeking investment, that might be a time you consider a C Corp election. For the most part, our clients for us are Schedule C taxpayers or they're S Corp taxpayers. So I want to be clear on that. One of the most common questions we get is someone feels ready to start an LLC and they think that fundamentally changes their tax return. It does not. An LLC is not a tax election with the IRS. An LLC is all about that liability protection that Chris talked about and keeping your business separate from your personal in terms of liability. An LLC, if you start off as just a Schedule C default taxpayer on your personal return and you add LLC to your name, nothing changed about your tax return. So that's a different, LLC does not impact how much taxes you're paying, when you're paying them. An LLC is a legal thing and it's not a tax election. So just want to throw that out there. You could start an LLC tomorrow for a business idea you have and your taxes didn't change. So the last thing I'll say about that is there is also the common question. Most of us, when we're W-2 employees, we have all of our taxes taken out by our employer, and what we have left over is our disposable income. When you are self-employed, the amount of tax that you pay is changed drastically because now you're paying all those employer taxes yourself as the owner. So just know this is just a very off the cuff. It's not specific. This number changes for each individual depending on their total household income. But to set yourself up for success, if you have profit in your business, not revenue, but if your revenue exceeds your expenses and you have leftover profit, take 30 to 35% of that and set it aside now. It really hurts when you don't do that at all and you just take all that income home as household income. That hurts later when you realize really a third of that wasn't even mine. It was supposed to go to the IRS and my state. So 30 to 35% is just a good, if we have to pick one number to, be universal, that's a good number. But those are some of my just, the most common questions when we do kind of a first time session with people. And I will say that we do, our ongoing clients, we have these regular meetings, whether quarterly or monthly, and then we'll do tax prep, bookkeeping, whatever is good for that client. But we also do first time sessions where if someone comes in, I'm starting a business, I have no idea what to do. We will cover like every element with you in like a first time session standalone. So know that there are people out there like Chris and myself who are willing to help you on a more, kind of as needed. Like you don't, like Chris said, you don't have to necessarily spend $10,000 to $20,000 your first year of business to get this help. So yeah, I think that's my 5-minute spiel, Lauren.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to go ahead and second the fact that Meghan and Chris are two individuals who are just fantastic supporters of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Of course, we love it when we see experts get involved to help entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur is hard enough. So surround yourself with smart people like Chris and Meghan. Now, we already heard Meghan's one key takeaway. So I want to really quickly just, Chris, can you talk to us about your one key takeaway a little bit?
Yeah, it kind of mirrors what Meghan was saying. Don't ignore this stuff. All too often, people will ignore this when they're first starting out for a number of reasons, and then they come to somebody like Meghan or myself with problems when they come up later. So while you don't need to spend 10 grand necessarily on lawyers and accountants when you're first starting out, you can probably get some quick advice for like $1,000, right? So just as an example, I charge $450 to do a basic LLC setup for a one-person company. And in that, you get an hour meeting with me to talk through a lot of logistical things. How do you sign contracts? What insurance might you need? What is intellectual property and why it matters to you, in addition to forming the company? And, $450 is not cheap, but it's also not, crazy expensive. And that one meeting helps most of my clients to get their structure in place so that they can avoid some of the bigger issues down the road. And I think Meghan and other accountants offer similar packages, kind of similarly priced, to just kind of get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, well, and that's so very crucial, because the fact is, if you don't do it right in the beginning, then you're going to have a lot of time and expense and headache on the back end as you try to play catch up. So I love the advice. Don't ignore this stuff. Address it early, address it often, so that you can maintain the health of your business. Your business is your baby, and you want to protect it, right? You want to hug your little baby close. So we have some really good questions coming in, and I'm very aware, Meghan and Chris and I, we've talked about the fact that we want to cram as much good information as possible into this session so that you walk away feeling fulfilled and like you got some help, but we've been talking very fast. So if you need us to drill down or get more specific on an issue, don't forget to submit your question via Q&A. We already have some questions coming in. Please do it via Q&A rather than the chat. It will help me manage it as we are moving forward. And the kind of general question that I'm going to ask, and this is to both Chris and Meghan, I just want to talk, what are some of the greatest challenges that you see early entrepreneurs face when they're looking to set up their business legally or accounting wise? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Meghan, and then we'll go to Chris, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to audience Q&A. So keep those questions coming.
Yeah. So some of the greatest challenges getting started, I would say a lot of times when people come to us, they're experiencing more demand than they anticipated. It's like a pleasant surprise, but it's hard to keep up with from an administrative point of view and servicing your clients well. It's like exciting and terrifying all at the same time. So I would say, yeah, some of the greatest challenges are that planning, like not taking the time to plan and get, the working on the business and not in the business. So again, it just goes back to my point of like budgeting your time the same way you'd budget your money, like forcing next week, I am going to spend 3 hours on the admin side. A lot of times, in that people do hire a little too late because they think I can't afford to pay someone, and they don't realize that if they hire someone for some maybe lower level admin help, that their time spent, they would actually increase the revenue that they can serve, and that actually will ROI pretty quickly. So part of it is that it's really scaling above what's going on. And as an entrepreneur myself, who went from 1 CPA to a team of 8 now, like that was the biggest challenge for me, was being so busy doing the work that I wasn't proactively planning and scaling out and saying, wow, if I hired an accountant in 3 months, my life would be much better in general, but also we'd be servicing a greater, population. And so it's It's a lot of times it's just the demand surprises you. In this economy, the last several years since I've started, small businesses are in high demand. There's honestly not enough supply of a lot of the services and products you all are providing to your clients, and you are just in high demand, and it is taxing, but the planning will save you. So I'd say that's a big part of it. I will say my industry doesn't serve people, like by and large, we struggle to provide really excellent customer service. And so one thing I would say, when you're thinking about my books and my numbers, and are they right, and are they messy, is anyone taking the time to do them, and you think about your tax return, a lot of people lump that all together and they think I just need my one visit with my tax professional once a year, and they need to help me fix all this and do all this. And because tax professionals are, by and large, struggle to serve clients in like a really customer service friendly way, there's this gap and there's this disgruntled relationship between the two. So think about your accounting and your bookkeeping as a separate thing. Tell your tax professional, I will pay you for a separate engagement outside my tax return to make sure I'm getting the accounting right. Or find a bookkeeper, like get into Facebook groups and find who's a really good bookkeeper I can hire. Or again, those YouTube videos of how do I do it right. But think about your accounting and your tax as two separate things. So your tax person's happy at tax time, and don't settle. If your tax person can't communicate to you like why you have a balance due and how to fix that going forward, if you don't get timely communication, keep looking until you find someone solid in both of those areas. Those are some of the biggest struggles that I see.
Okay, well, thanks for that. And Chris, how about you?
Yeah, struggles and challenges is that there's too much information out there in a lot of ways, and a lot of information that's correct in one context but wrong in so many other contexts. I can't tell you how many people come to me and they're like, I want a Delaware C Corp because I'm going to be the next Facebook. It's like, well, okay, well, maybe you will be, but you're not today. So you may not need a Delaware C Corp. And they might, but they probably don't. And forming a Delaware C Corp and then, getting a year into your business and realizing that that's not the right path for you. Now you're stuck in this Delaware C Corp. I mean, you can get out of it, but pain. Or somebody who comes to me and they're like, I want a holding company and 3 subsidiaries and I need it right now. And I'm like, well, wait a second, let's explore what happens if you set that up. Now you're going to have 4 bank accounts, 4 EINs, and 4 different company names that you have to deal with. Are you sure that's what you need right now? Because a lot of the advice you find online is intended for like high growth startups and stuff. And that's fine. If you have that potential, if you've got investors ready to give you money, do that. But if you don't, or if you're going to bootstrap, then you might want to take some different advice, which might be just start an LLC in Missouri, because that might be all you need. So keep it simple in your earliest days is my advice. You can always add complexity later if you need it.
Absolutely. I love that as advice. And just a personal note. So InnovateHER was formed as an LLC. Then we, as we started to kind of move along our business journey, we became an S Corp. And then now we have actually applied for our 501c3 as a subsidiary arm piece to what we're doing. And so we've evolved, but as you said, Chris, we've continued to add complexity as we kind of proof of concept MVP'd ourselves through the starting a business process. And that was hugely helpful to us because there was so much that I didn't have to worry about by scaling it back and starting it simple. And so that's a really great takeaway. So we have started to get some really fantastic questions in Q&A, and definitely keep them coming. But I'm actually, this first one, I love this first one because we're making an assumption here, and I'm going to ask the question and I'm going to say, why do I need an LLC? Chris?
Legally, you don't. You can run a business under your own name and be fine. In fact, I've got clients that do that. I've got one client who's been doing that for like 25 years. No problems at all. But there are a lot of benefits to having an LLC. So if you're doing like a couple projects a year in your spare time, you probably don't need an LLC. Probably not worth it. If you're doing this and it's making up a substantial portion of your income or all of your income, it probably makes a lot more sense to have an LLC. First of all, you can limit your liability. Hence the name, limited liability company, right? You get limited liability, which means you're not liable personally for the debts and obligations of the company. So if the company does something wrong, or if an employee or a contractor of the company does something wrong, you're not going to be personally liable. The other parties to the lawsuits cannot come after your house and your car and your wages and things like that. Now, you're still liable for anything you do by yourself. So Pixel Law is just me. I'm the only employee. I'm the only owner. If I make a mistake, I can't blame the LLC, right? But if I sign a client agreement, or maybe let's say a lease agreement, and I default in my lease, I'm not liable. My company's liable. right? So anyway, you get limited liability. Sometimes it helps you with contracting with larger people and larger companies because it's sometimes easier to contract with an LLC versus a human being. It's certainly easier to sell an LLC than it is to sell a sole proprietorship. And taxes, depending on what your tax election is, you might be able to get a tax benefit by being an LLC. So there's a lot of very good reasons to be an LLC, but to be clear, you don't have to be. But if your business is a business and not a hobby, I usually say go for it. Yep, I think you might be muted.
Yep, sorry, dog again. Apparently my front stoop is Grand Central Station right now. Perfect timing. At any rate, so I actually have a question because so I hear a lot about DBA accounts for folks who have not officially filed for an LLC, but still want to be able to accept money, accept revenue as their business. So what's the difference between a DBA account and like the LLC, or just, you know, taking cash in as an individual?
Yeah. Can I answer that real quick and then hand it to Megan? Because I actually have a follow-up question on that for Megan.
Okay.
A DBA is just a fictitious name. It's just doing business as. So if I were not going to incorporate my business and it was just going to be Chris Brown, attorney at law, whatever, which is what most law firms call themselves, which is silly. And let's say that I wanted to use the name Pixel Law, but I never formed an LLC. Pixel Law would be a DBA, or sometimes called a fictitious name. The reason you file that with the state is so that if somebody wants to sue Pixel Law and they're like, well, who's Pixel Law? They can look it up on the state database and see, oh, Chris Brown owns the DBA Pixel Law, and they can find me and sue me. Most states have this, and it applies to an LLC too. Like, let's just say my LLC was Chris Brown Enterprises LLC, but I used Pixel Law in marketing. I would need to file it in that case too, because I'm using a name different than my formal name. So that's what a DBA database is. My question for Megan really is, because Lauren was asking about accounts, and you have to set this up with your bank too. So Missouri has a fictitious name database. Kansas does not. And I've never figured out what happens in Kansas when you want to use a DBA on a bank account. Do you know, Megan?
Okay, great question. And it kind of leads to one point I wanted to make. I don't know specifically in Kansas, but that's one thing I was going to say is that it used to be very common to do a business account in your social DBA business name, and it's not an LLC. A lot of times banks today, if you say you want to set up a business account, they don't acknowledge or offer a DBA account. Like, a lot of times they're like, where's your LLC articles and where's your EIN? And so it eliminates a lot of hassle, because by and large banks want to see LLC docs and an EIN to set up a business account. And an LLC is so inexpensive and like not difficult to maintain. Like in the state of Missouri, Chris, correct me on anything, but in the state of Missouri, an LLC is inexpensive to get. I do recommend, pay someone like Chris to set it up so you know what you're doing, but it's inexpensive to set up, and there's not even an annual report required from Missouri. So once you set up an LLC in Missouri, you're off and running indefinitely until you tell the state you want to close it. So like, it's just that cost benefit. The benefit so outweighs the cost that it just makes a lot of sense. Again, if it's not a hobby and you're officially doing this as a business, I highly recommend getting the LLC and just continuing on from there. But I'm not sure in Kansas with the DBA, since they don't register fictitious names. I have to look into that.
Yeah, I didn't actually know that. I've always operated on the Missouri side. So thanks for illuminating that little fact, Chris. I'm going to be busting it out at some trivia party sometime. Now, so this next question it comes from the audience, and it's really interesting. And I know, name changes are a pain in the butt. A lot of us who got married, who happen to identify as ladies, we maybe changed our last names. I know that I did. I hated my maiden name. But I have a really interesting question here. So if my LLC is filed with my maiden name, can I file taxes in my married name, or do I need to change my LLC to my married name? My social is in my married name. Also, if I receive a check in my married name for services rendered by the business, is that okay? Or should the check be made out to the business? I don't have a bank account in the business name. I was not going to file taxes with the business because I'm not making a profit, and just file taxes as personal income. And then that was like several questions all in one. But I think I'm going to go ahead. Like, Megan, do you have thoughts? Chris, do you have thoughts? That was a lot.
Let's start with the LLC and the married name. Let's let Chris answer that.
Yeah.
Well, I would kind of back up and just do this broadly. You should try to keep your LLC and your personal stuff completely separate. The only context where your name comes into play with the LLC is as an owner, or maybe as an employee if you're taxed as an S corp. But the LLC needs to be completely separate from you. You should get all your checks payable to the LLC. All of the checks should be deposited into the business bank account. If somebody writes a check out to you personally for your company, you could probably just deposit your business bank account. Most banks will probably let you do that. And if not, I would deposit in your personal account and then move it to your bank account, your business account, before you move it back to your account, right? The idea is your client pays the business pays you. And you always want to keep those things totally separate. In terms of if you change your name, there's a lot of stuff to update. Changing your name with the Secretary of State, like an LLC name, is really easy. You file a one-page amendment. But changing your LLC name is a big pain, because then you have to update the IRS, contracts, online places, all that. It's a pain. I did that with my firm. It used to be called Venture Legal. Now it's called Pixel Law, and it's just kind of a big hassle. Megan, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so that's one thing I was going to say. Let's say you do have just a DBA, you don't do the LLC, or let's say you don't get around to the DBA because maybe it's Meghan Hovee Services and whatever. I would always have two separate bank accounts. Like people do, freelancers and contractors a lot of times stick the business income in with their personal account and then take expenses out of it. And that gets messy quick. And it's really hard to get an accurate tax return when you're trying to decipher business income and expenses versus your personal income and expenses. So I would always have two accounts just separate, however you're legally structured, have a separate bank account for the business. Another comment on that, just that comment about my business is at a loss, so I'm just filing it with my personal tax return. Again, even if your business is taking a loss, that's still recorded as Schedule C income and expenses on your personal return. So even if your business startup phase, it's at a loss, that still goes on its own schedule on your personal return. I think those are my two comments there.
Okay. Well, so thank you so much, and hopefully that illuminated things for our question asker. Next up, and this is, I am a freelancer / independent contractor that lives in KC-Mo, but I have clients in multiple states all over the US. What is a good resource to make sure I'm paying taxes appropriately if needing to? In other words, how do I know if I should be paying taxes in other states or not? Everything I've found has been overwhelming to understand, which is the undercurrent of this entire event. But I'm going to go ahead and punch that over to Megan.
Yeah. So super good question. That's the world we live in right now, that when you're based somewhere, but you're helping people all over the country, and that's normal to do these days. So assuming this freelancer independent contractor is just services and not selling product, your income is allocable to where you are operating. So if you're consulting people, but it's always via Zoom, you don't need to worry about income tax to New Mexico and income tax to Arizona, and that it's about where you operate and serve. So if you are flying and helping clients in a location and you're physically going there, you might need to look at allocating your income between states, but otherwise your income is allocable to where you are doing your business, even if your client is remote. That answer changes in a terrible way when we're talking about sales tax on products. And I strongly recommend using software for compliance there. And that's a whole topic we could get into in another GEW session. But if we're talking just professional services, no physical product being sold, you can simplify that by saying, if I'm predominantly here in KC-Mo, that's where I am paying income tax, is in KC-Mo.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
Also, don't forget about the 1% tax either. In case you know, they're 1% tax. Megan and I can go on for this for a while. My wife just got a letter in the mail for 2016, 1% tax that was owed. 2016, they didn't tell us for like 7 years, and then they started sending us letters every week about it going to collections. And Megan was awesome at helping us fix all that, because of course the city's records were wrong. So, but anyway, don't forget about the 1% tax.
Can I make two really quick statements on that, on KC-Mo?
Oh, please.
Okay. Fun fact, this is so misunderstood. If you live in Kansas City, Missouri, it does not matter where you generate your income. You owe 1% to the city for living there. So it doesn't matter if you're only working in Leavenworth, you are going to owe 1% on that Leavenworth income if you live here. So that's a fun surprise for some people.
And your employer in Leavenworth may not realize they owe it. That's what happened to my wife. She was working in Bonner Springs, and her company for a while wasn't reporting it because they were in Bonner Springs. They didn't care.
Yeah. Yes,
Sorry,
and that happens all the time. And then if you work in Kansas City, but you don't live in Kansas City, you owe them 1% on all that work done in Kansas City. So think of it that way. It's kind of a negative. If I live in Kansas City, I owe the 1%. If I work in Kansas City, I owe the 1% on that work in Kansas City. So that's just something to get really clear about. Another thing is this, just fun facts, but Kansas City, it is so easy to have accounts duplicated. So when you start your business, your Schedule C, and you've got 1% profits tax on what you profit in your business, it's very easy to have one tax professional file it one way, and then the next year, maybe you did it on your own and you filed it through TurboTax. I get clients all the time that get letters that say they owe Kansas City $600. And they pay it because they're scared. But the truth is that 600 was an estimate because they didn't get a filing for that second account that was created in your name. When you get notices like that, please don't just pay them. Please find a tax professional because there's a good chance you don't owe it at all or it's wrong. So please, like, just know that. That's kind of just some fun facts about living and doing business in Kansas City.
Okay.
They're great to work with. They're great to work with. No, no criticism, but that's something that happens a lot.
For sure. Well, so that's definite. If you see it happen all the time, we know that a ton of people are out there making that mistake. So let's not do that. Also, let's talk to people like Meghan and make sure that we are protecting ourselves and our tax liability. So next up, this is actually a really good question from Jordan Williams, and I'm interested to hear the answer to this one as well. But when accepting payments via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, etc., should the income be recorded on the date of service, the date the money was received in the payment app, or when it's transferred to the bank account? And I'm gonna poke at you, Meghan.
Yeah, I feel like that might be a type A personality sending that question. Like, I love when people ask those questions because usually our clients are not worried about it. And it's a great question. So really, most of us start off as cash basis taxpayers. And that means when we get the money, we record it as income. So the most technically correct thing is when it hits your bank, that's when to record it as income. If you know your accrual basis, that answer is a little different. It's about when you do the work and earn the money, regardless of when they pay you. But most of us are cash basis. So honestly, you're not wrong if you do either. That's really okay to be, I would just be consistent about it. But really the most technically correct thing, cash basis taxpayer, when the money's in your account, that's a good time to record it.
Okay.
And a follow-up, if the PayPal account should be considered your account. So if say my client paid me into my PayPal account on December 30th, but I don't move it to my bank account until January 2nd, that still is income from the prior year because the PayPal account is just another bank account, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's true. Yeah. A lot of us have payment processors though, where they the client's paid, but the payment processor is holding it for a while. But that's true. If it's Venmo or PayPal, that's money sitting in an account that's in your name. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Well, just a reminder, folks, please make sure that you're asking your questions in Q&A rather than the chat. I will do everything I can to manage multiple systems, but I'm not great at talking and thinking and doing things on Zoom at the same time. So if you could help me out, that would be wonderful. I am going to go ahead. I'm going to go to the chat, and it looks like this is actually going to be for Chris. Is it easier to delete an LLC and restart than to change a name, assuming that this is an LLC that has never made a profit?
Probably. I mean, it really depends on the context of, your specific situation. I should probably be clear. I'm not anyone's lawyer. Actually, I am some of your lawyers, but this webinar, I'm not your lawyer. It really depends on the context of your specific situation. If the company's never made any money, if the company never opened up a bank account, it doesn't have any expenses, it probably is easier just to start over, to be honest. It's not hard to dissolve an LLC. Both Kansas and Missouri make it relatively easy to do that. And obviously starting up a new one's relatively easy as well, but it really depends on the context of your business. It's possible we could just change your name, especially if you don't have an EIN. So, I can't give you a guaranteed one way or the other. Either way works.
Okay. All right. And that was apparently there was a caveat that was asked for privacy purposes. And I definitely know a lot of women sometimes who are kind of concerned about having their address information like right out there. So good to know. All right. So this next one, this is a really interesting question. And I feel like there's a little bit of philosophy behind it, right? Like this is less of a tactical question and more of a vision question. So I'm actually going to ask both of you your thoughts, and I'm going to say, so this individual says, I want to start my own transportation companies, private and Medicaid/Medicare. Eventually, I want to start my own home healthcare agencies, private and Medicaid/Medicare. A nonprofit is also in my business plans. I have cerebral palsy and I'm in a wheelchair. Is there any way I could provide these services and benefit from my own services? Why would I want to provide these services but use my competitors? Is what it says. So I think what if I'm understanding correctly, and please feel free to chime in the chat or here in Q&A to get us more context. But I think what we're asking is, what is the benefit to creating your own business, building your own business, rather than just going somewhere else? So I know that that's kind of an open-ended question, I would say. Megan, it looks like you're nodding your head, so I'm going to pick on you first. What do you think?
So I think, and this sounds familiar, like something Chris and I have probably helped specific clients with in the past. A lot of time, I do often see people come in that have a blend of a nonprofit kind of motive with wanting to start a business, and those are super intertwined when they come in. And I would try to get clear on, when you ask yourself that question, like, number one, am I interested in being a business owner and making profit on a business service? Like, is that my goal? If it's not, and that's kind of a result of wanting to, obtain services in a way that, like, well, I could do this for myself. Why am I paying someone else? Opening a business might not be the best solution. Like, if I would just get really clear on your goals. Am I wanting to, start a business endeavor and make a profit on it? Like, let's say yes or no on that. And then the nonprofit element, like, ask ourselves, what's my goal with the nonprofit and what do I want to achieve there? But it doesn't really work to open up a for-profit LLC. That's really the motive behind it is a not-for-profit motive. So I think that's kind of my initial answer, is getting clear. It's okay to do both, but they're not the same mission and they're not the same organization. Just fundamentally, one is not looking for a return on any investment and one is. So I think that's where I'd start, is getting really clear on, does that sound good? Is that what I want to do, is start a business, run a business, go from there. But welcome any
well, and so I'm just going to add a little side note, as somebody who works in the social impact philanthropic space a lot. And I will say that just because you are a nonprofit does not mean that you cannot make money, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't run your nonprofit like a business.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Like, you still have to dot your I's and cross your T's, and all of those beautiful things that drive us entrepreneurs crazy, but are so necessary and crucial to our success. Chris, your thoughts?
I just have one follow-up, and it mirrors, I think, what Megan was saying. If you have a nonprofit, the money that comes in cannot be used for your personal benefit. So if you have a medical condition that allows you to benefit from the nonprofit purpose, I've never been asked this question, but I presume you can benefit from the nonprofit in that regard, as long as you're not getting some special treatment. Like, if you're a nonprofit that provides transportation, but you charge $5 per trip for your normal customers, but you ride for free, that might be weird to the IRS. But if you also pay the $5 fee, I don't think that would be an issue, because it's not really benefiting you personally, because you're in the class of people that's designed to help. But you just need to be really cautious with that, because in most nonprofits, you should not be getting a personal benefit. You can draw a salary and you can be paid reimbursed for expenses, but you can't take profit out of the company or assets out of the company.
Yeah. And let's say that you do decide, I could provide these services, I could run a business, and I could make a profit in doing that, and I want to have a social impact. That's okay that I would hope every business owner wants to have a social impact. So let's say that you want to do that and you want a nonprofit element. So also, I want an organization where people donate to it, and then I fund scholarships for people to ride for free or something. Like, that's legitimate. I have a business over here with paying clients that makes money, and over here I have a nonprofit where it's funding some help to lower socioeconomic, whatever the vision is. That's all okay. On the nonprofit, what I often see is people say, I want a nonprofit, I want to be able to put money in it, write it off for taxes. That is not a traditional 501c3 when you are funding it. By definition, a 501c3 is publicly supported. So just think of it that way, that like you're going to have to rethink your whole model if you're not soliciting donors from the public or charging, you know, an activity that's related to the nonprofit. Like your source of funding for a nonprofit can't be you. That's a private foundation, and that's a lot of hoops to jump through. So that's just something to think about. Is like that's perfectly okay to have that vision where you've got a business and you've got a nonprofit, maybe they're even a little related, but nonprofits are arguably more complex than for-profits in terms of setting them up and running them, because the government wants to make sure they're not being abused. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through with, and Lauren can probably speak to that as much as anyone, having that evolution of LLC to 501c3, but.
Yeah, very intentional choices all along the way. And I think at first it was just a matter, like, again, that proof of concept thing. Like, I don't really know what Innovator KC is yet. So as we figure it out, let's try to make some money while we're at it. And then as we have progressed and kind of gotten stronger in our mission, we found that, okay, now it makes sense for us to become that S Corp. And now it makes sense for us to introduce that 501c3 subsidiary arm to run our leadership development through. You know, so at every point there are advantages and disadvantages. There's more reporting as you get more complex with your business agreements. You know, there's a lot more reporting and a lot more that you have to do. So yeah, to go back to Chris's earlier point, keep it simple. You know, start at your base and then you can build from there. All right, so friends, keep your questions coming. I still see them coming in. We've got a few more to answer, but this is your time, my friends. You have two incredible experts invested in your success right here to answer your questions. So make sure to ask them in the Q&A, and we're just going to keep on going, and we're going to get to as many as we can. So I'm going to ask, if we have expenses related to the start of a business and we incur them ahead of the setup of a business account, is there advice related to a later tax filing on how we should track those expenses? So that's the question number one, and I'm gonna point that at Meghan.
Yes. Yeah, super, super good and relevant question, especially when you're starting a business. So the number one answer for you is track them. Track them, track them, track them. Do not lose them. The resulting answer of when they are deducted or taken depends on the business and size of business. A lot of tax code works like that like the actual calculation for how do I deduct meals or travel when it's business and personal, and like the answer is ridiculous in terms of calculating it. And I don't expect clients to do that. Like your tax professional can and will make sure it's right on your tax return, but you've got to track them for them to know about it and get it right on your return. The quick answer, if you're a small business and your startup expenses are under 50,000, so if you haven't spent more than 50 grand in total to get started up with legal and office setup and whatever, then you can take up to 5,000 before your business is like operational. You can take up to 5,000 right away. So it might very well be that you start up this year, you've got $3,000 in expenses, you don't have revenue coming in, you can still expense it. But if you have a huge spend, you've got investors, like this is a serious startup, there's a good chance you're not taking that until you're operational and you have revenue coming in the door. Either way, you are going to take those expenses. You should, and you're eligible to do that, track them. That's the biggest answer. Again, a tax professional, whether one-off or an ongoing tax preparer, can make sure you get it right, but you're definitely taking them. So track them. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic answer. And so this is coming from personal experience. Ask me how I know. But one of the things that I would encourage everyone to do when tracking it, like start tracking your expenses early and make sure that you put a system into place, because what happened very early on in the Innovator evolution is I would have these expenses and I would kind of like throw the receipts in a drawer. I had like a little bag that I would like pop them into, but there was no real system. I wasn't, tracking them through an Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. And then it came tax time, and then I had to sit down and I had to figure out, deductions and it took forever. So if you just spend 5 minutes a day just kind of writing down your stuff, making sure your receipts are in the right place in a good order, like whatever it is, whatever system works for you, use that system and do it early and often. Everything needs to be done early and often.
Piggybacking on that super quick, I just like saying all tax professionals everywhere. Some people still think it's normal to bring a box of receipts to their tax accountant for their tax return. That is not how we do things in 2022. And it's not a criticism. I think a lot of people think that's genuinely what you're supposed to do. You do not have to prove to your tax preparer that you had those expenses. You may have to prove it to the IRS later in an audit. You do not have to prove to your tax preparer that those are real expenses. So please do the Excel sheet, do a piece of paper, pencil, like whatever it is. What you need for taxes is total income, revenue, top line revenue, and then expense by category. My total office expenses was this, my total meals was this, my total whatever. That is all your tax preparer needs to get your tax return done. So don't bring the receipt.
Okay. All right. I promise to never do that again. So there was a follow-up to that question. If necessary, should we have the business reimburse these expenses back to me personally or keep them separate from the business account altogether? And again, I'm looking at you, Meghan.
Yes. So yeah, the reimbursing of the expenses, I guess that assumes that it's personal, like you paid for it personally, but it was really business related. So maybe you didn't have that business bank account set up yet. It's going to nut out. What is important for tax purposes is that you track them and you put them on the tax return or you give them to your tax preparer. If you reimburse yourself for them through the business, you're still going to get the deduction, whether you paid for it personally out of pocket, and that's kind of called an owner investment. So whether you paid for them personally or you paid for them on the business, it's going to get deducted either way. So you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Oh no, I got to make sure I run this CVS charge that was for the business back through. You don't have to do that. It doesn't have to run through the bank account in order to take it on the tax return. For LLC purposes, you really want to keep those separate and you do want things charged that way. But if you had some stuff you paid for out of pocket personally before your business is up and running, you're going to take that on your tax return. You don't have to worry about making sure the business reimburses you for that.
Okay. Absolutely perfect. Now, I feel like we have been picking Meghan's brain for a while. I've got a good one for Chris. Chris, you ready?
Yep.
We are getting in the real estate investing business. Fun. We own a few properties and have not yet set up any LLC for our business. Do you recommend we set up one LLC for all of the properties or set up LLCs for each one?
Good question. I've got two answers for that. The first answer is, generally speaking, when you set up a company like that, you're going to want to set up different LLCs for each property. The reason is to isolate liability. So if something goes wrong at one of the properties, say the house burns down and somebody dies, like worst case scenario, right? And say it was your fault, the house burnt down, and they sue you for that. They can sue the person who made the mistake, like the contractor or whoever it is that actually lit the match or whatever, but they can also sue the landlord if the landlord was responsible. And when I say landlord, I mean the LLC that owned the building and leased it. And if you have 5 properties all in one LLC, well, those are assets that people can go after in that lawsuit. Whereas if you set up different LLCs and you treat them properly like different LLCs, the court generally is not going to go after all those other houses because they're owned in different companies, right? So you can isolate liability. The second answer is if you're in Kansas, you might be able to use what's called a series LLC to make it a little bit easier to do this. Those were invented after I went to law school, so I never really learned them and I haven't had an opportunity yet to work on them. But the idea is that you have a parent LLC with a bunch of subsidiary LLCs, but they all sit under one legal entity somehow. I don't entirely understand how it works, but if you are doing that in Kansas, you might talk to a lawyer who's familiar with series LLCs. Unfortunately, I've yet to meet a lawyer who knows how they work because they're so new. But those are the two options. In either event, keep everything separate.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So I have this question. It's been sitting here because I was like, I don't really know what to do with it. So I'm going to ask it. And then if it's okay with you, I'm actually going to give my answer because I feel like I'm kind of uniquely qualified, but it's one of those kind of philosophy questions, the more tactical questions. How niche should your business be? For example, I can do multiple things within the creative industry, photo, video, marketing, directing, etc. But I am unsure how to monetize or capitalize on the business side with a variety of skills. Can that sit under one roof? So as someone who has run a creative agency for many years, I'm going to tell you that you can absolutely capitalize on multiple skills under one roof. In fact, that is an asset. However, there's a caveat. I would say pick three to start with. Pick the 3 things that you are truly excellent at, that you know you're going to be able to build a reputation and a portfolio around. And if it's 4, if it's 2, whatever, but pick pick just a few of the things that you are truly, truly great at doing, that you feel comfortable with, and that you're going to really impress your clients and build an impressive portfolio. Then, as you kind of figure things out and move things around, you can expand, you can add more services, you can find more ways to bring value to your customers. So that is my answer. And I'm wondering, Chris, Megan, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I love that question. But I'm like, I actually feel like I have an answer for that. But how about you, Chris? Do you have anything that you want to add?
Sure. Legally, you can do as much under one company as you want to, unless you restrict it in the articles of organization. So most states will ask what the purpose of the company is. And if you say the purpose is to transact legal business, I should say to transact law services, that's all that company can do. But most people don't do that. Most people set up their LLC in a way where they can transact any business, right? From a non-legal standpoint, I can say I agree with Megan, or I'm sorry, with Lauren's comment entirely. Think about it this way. If you go to two lawyer websites, two solo practitioner lawyers like myself, and one says that they do DUIs, estate planning, family law, LLC formations, and trademarks, and then you go to somebody like my website and I say I do business transactions. If you're looking for business transactions, who are you going to pick? You're going to pick the one person who does just that, because there's no way any lawyer is good at doing all of those things. Right. Now, if you go to a law firm website with 500 lawyers, yeah, they can do it all because they have 500 lawyers. So you want to be niche enough that you look like the expert in your field. And you don't want to make yourself look like a general practitioner in whatever industry, in my opinion, because you just won't stand out from everybody else. Doesn't mean you can't do those other things. A couple of my clients have had traffic tickets, and while I don't go to court often, I help them amend them. I don't advertise that, but I can do it, and I'll do it for a client from time to time. But it's not on my website because it's not my core offering.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I want to echo that because I'm someone who's walked through, like when I started, anyone that wanted to do anything tax, accounting, software related, like, yeah, I'll do that. Sure, I'll try. Yeah, I'd say it's everything. And I always heard that the more you define your target audience and the more you define what you do in your core offering, actually, the more business you'll get and you'll enjoy it more. And I honestly didn't believe it at first. I thought, yeah, whatever, I'm going to take everything that comes my way. And over time, when I got the confidence and the demand to I have to specialize, because you start to see different reasons in your business that it makes sense, some relief on your end, whatever. I found that to be so true, that it really does work that way. Like Chris defining, I do business transactions. It really does work that way. That if you define and narrow in what you want to do, you'll find that the client base that you get will probably grow more quickly and it'll be a better fit for you. But at the same time, experiment this isn't a final decision. One thing you'll find if you do those three, I love Lauren's advice. If you say three things, these are the three things I'm going to do for clients, you'll probably find, wow, I love this one, but it doesn't actually make me as much money. So I might need to tweak how I do it, or, you're going to find that. So do experiment. That's part of being an entrepreneur. So, and the elevator pitch, I know, we've got such an elevator pitch of our core offering now. Another thing you always heard, you need to have an elevator pitch. And I thought, yeah, whatever. No, it's so true. It has helped tremendously to make sure we're clear with our clients. This is what we do, and this is what we don't do. And to be able to say that in 5 minutes has been tremendously helpful. So if you pick those three, still come up with an elevator pitch to say that quickly, as to what am I and what's my, value proposition for you?
Yeah. Well, speaking to that elevator pitch piece, I've actually thought about doing an innovator event around this, because I have found in my time as an interviewer, people are not very good about speaking about themselves in positive, kind ways, but speaking about their businesses. And you want to be succinct, you want to get right to the exact heart of what you have to offer. And I just find it so interesting. So yeah, sit down, write it out, do it in a mirror, internalize it to the point that you don't even have to think about it. It just spits right out, because you're going to say it a lot. And some of the things that you need to be thinking about with your elevator pitch are things like, who are you as the founder? Why do you do what you do? Why do you do it better than anyone else? And how specifically you solve that problem. Just a few things to think about as you're putting together your elevator pitch. But I am a huge fan of the elevator pitch. Being good at it has helped me a lot. So keep that in mind. Okay, so another good question came in. How do we know what expenses you are able to deduct for the business, like food, mileage, hotel, etc.? Is there a list somewhere? And is there a cap on how much you can deduct on food per time, or a cap on another item or category? So we're going to look at Megan, and then let's try to do this quick, because I've got a few more questions.
Awesome. And I know Chris, I think, has a hard stop, so I will try to make this answer quickly so he can at least give us a wave. If it's, so here's my answer. Once you become a business and you have a business, tax return or, tax return information related to the business on your personal, that might be time to hire a professional. TurboTax is great when you're just an individual tax return, but that might be time. And the reason I say that is because you cannot memorize all the calculations. Meals and entertainment is always 50% until COVID, and it's 100%, but then that's going to go away again. If it touches your business in any way, list it. Make a list of the things you're unsure about and the amounts. If you think it even might relate to the business, put it on that list. Your tax professional will take it and they will maximize those deductions. Anything they can take, the proportion of them, they will get it on your tax return, but they can't do it without the information. Don't put the onus on yourself to know the calculations, is my opinion. It's not worth your time, but make sure you list anything you have a question about. No question is a dumb question when it comes to tax time. So just make sure anything you think might be include it and give that list to your tax person.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. Chris, can you stick around for just a minute?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So for Chris, this might be out of scope. Do I have to somehow block sale of my game to England in online stores? It's based on a property in the public domain in the USA, but not yet in England. And honestly, I feel like whoever this is, I'm going to give them $5 if they stumped you.
Yeah, well, I'm not an international law expert, but believing something is in the public domain, that can be hard to verify. I mean, I don't know your specific context, so I don't know, but it'd be hard to verify, first of all. Second of all, if it's illegal in England, I wouldn't sell it in England. Or if it violates somebody else's copyright in England, I wouldn't sell it in England. I think that's just too much risk. If you're selling stuff in the EU, which I guess they're not really part of the EU anymore, but you have to worry about the EU's GDPR, their privacy regulations. If you're going to expand internationally, my short advice is find an international law attorney to help you with that, because most lawyers are not international law experts. I did take international law, but that was like 15 years ago. So. Yeah. Not helpful.
All right. One final question, and I know we're 1 minute over, but we're going to do a lightning fast series of answers. What tools and resources do you use? Chris, you alluded to like Zero. And, so what systems, tools, and tricks do you use to help your clients?
An accounting program, first of all. Like I use Zero, but I'm thinking about switching to FreshBooks. But regardless, just use an accounting program. I use e-signatures a lot through DocuSign, which I absolutely love. I use all the Gmail suite or Google Suite, Gmail, Google Calendar, all that stuff, which is super cheap. I built my website on Flywheel, on WordPress, hosted on Flywheel. There's actually a tweet that I've shared a few times. If you just search my Twitter account for like Asana, for example, you'll see.
This tweet.
Yeah, so I have a whole list of everything.
Of awesome tools and very affordable.
Yeah, so I know I mentioned Asana. So if you search Twitter for the Pixel Lawyer and the word Asana, it'll come up, and I list like 15 of my favorite online tools. So, but hey, I really hate to do this. I got to run. I have to hop on another meeting that started 2 minutes ago. I shared my email and my Twitter and Instagram account in the chat box. Feel free to reach out anytime, but Lauren is the host. So you're all welcome to stick around and keep chatting, but thank you so much for coming. And Lauren, thanks for great moderating, and Megan for the great insight.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
So I'll see you guys later.
Much, Chris. As always, amazing to work with you, my friend. And I highly recommend to our participants, our attendees, check out Chris at Pixel Law. He is in it to help you out, and he's an amazing attorney.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye.